Welcome to part 2 of the Fire Risk Assessment module. This is the final section to complete the FRA training programme.
Completing the assessment. In order to comply with the requirement to complete a fire risk assessment, either you, as the owner or landlord, can complete the assessment yourself following the completion of this training, or you can employ a competent person to do this on your behalf. However, regardless of who actually completes the assessment, as the landlord, you will still be responsible in law for meeting the requirements of the legislation. There are 5 steps to completing a fire risk assessment. Step 1. Identify all fire hazards that could be a potential source of ignition, a source of fuel and a source of oxygen. Step 2. Identify the people at risk as the people in and around the premises and people who are especially vulnerable. Step 3. Evaluate the risk of a fire starting and evaluate the risk to people from a fire. Step 4. Remove or reduce fire hazards, remove or reduce the risk to people from fire and protect people by introducing fire precautions. Step 5. Record, plan, inform, instruct and train. You must record any major findings as well as recording the actions taken to rectify these. Discuss and work with other responsible people to prepare an emergency plan. Inform your tenant where they should evacuate to and where to stand safely. Instruct and train relevant people, including your tenants, on their responsibilities in maintaining fire safety. Part of this is the job that we're doing now by training you to be competent. Make sure you review your fire risk assessment regularly and make changes where necessary. Please be aware during your midterm inspections that tenants often remove a battery as the fire alarm keeps going off. In such a case, it's important you record at your midterm inspection that the battery has been removed as a direct result of the tenants. Also record that you have written to them to inform them that this is a legal requirement to have a working smoke alarm and that a battery will need to be put back within 24 hours. Should this not occur, you will enter the property to replace the battery to ensure the property remains compliant and giving your charge that service. Giving feedback to the tenant is important so that you can keep compliant to fire safety, especially when your tenant is in situ. Now you are clear on the different legislation concerning fire safety and your responsibilities as the landlord, we will move on to the different sections to include in a detailed fire risk assessment. Some of this will apply specifically to HMO properties, as you may find that it isn't relevant to you if you have a 1-bedroom flat that you are renting out, but it's still important that you understand the law and the current legislation of what's required from a landlord. In the assessment, you will cover fire doors, fire extinguishers, smoke, carbon monoxide and heat alarms, fire blankets, PAT testing, emergency lighting, electrical safety inspections, fire loads or combustibles, portable and fixed heating, dangerous substances, fire safety signs and notices, measures to limit fire spread, and development means of escape. So let's start with the fire doors. As you can see from this slide, there are 2 types of fire doors available for a standard residential property, a 30-minute fire door and a 60-minute fire door. Most fire doors will now come with intumescent strips, which work by sealing around the edges of a door in the event of a fire. These strips are either located around the outer door frame or the door itself. Please note that some fire doors can be decorative and they're not traditionally heavy in a residential property, whereas commercial fire doors are a lot heavier. Fire doors always have 4 screws where the hinges sit, whereas standard doors will only have 3 screws. Also note that fire door handles or hinges will need to be fire retardant, so it's imperative that you do not change the locks or handles that they are supplied with, unless you're going to replace them with a fire retardant product. In this slide, you can see fire door damage. Now, this is a commercial fire door, so it's slightly different, but as you can see, it's got multiple chips to the wood. The glass panel is actually cracked below a sign that you can't see, and the strip that sits along the right-hand side of either door edge is partially missing. So this fire door is defective, and in the event of a fire, it won't work. The picture on the right-hand side is of a residential fire door. Now, the blue circle indicates the intumescent strip that's currently missing. This strip is important as it creates a seal between the door and the frame, stopping smoke and allowing the full 30 or 60-minute window for the fire brigade to rescue you. If the intumescent strip is missing, it could result in the loss of life. Often you'll find tenants have screwed hooks for their coats into the door, or where the door panel has split from their excessive opening and closing, or hanging things over the top of doors. Any such damage to the surfaces of the door will reduce the effectiveness of the fire door. During your inspections, you will be required to look for these things because this is a breach in a fire door, and it's important that you highlight this breach, and more importantly, at time of inventory, it's important for you to note that there was not a breach and the photographs are provided to show that evidence. Fire extinguisher. There are various different types of fire extinguisher available. The majority of fire extinguishers are red in colour, but you can also get silver fire extinguishers, which are more common within commercial buildings. The standard red fire extinguisher can contain various products. You can have water, foam, dry powder, CO2 and wet chemical. Now, the nature of the fire and what caused it to start will depend on what product or fire extinguisher you use. If you're placing a fire extinguisher within a property, you'll need to make sure it's in the right location. So for instance, if you place a small fire extinguisher within a kitchen, it will need to be wall mounted with a sign indicating whether it's water or foam and what it's suitable for. If a tenant feels they need to tackle a fire, they will know whether the fire extinguisher on the wall will be suitable to tackle that particular fire. It is still advised that tenants do not tackle fires and instead they exit the property and allow the fire brigade to deal with any fire. On this slide, there is a list of the fire extinguishers and which fires they can be used for. Please familiarise yourself with the list. Take a photograph on your phone so that you can keep it for reference. If you've decided to have a fire extinguisher within the property, you are then required to maintain it. Most fire extinguishers come with a red pin or a form of plastic pin which blocks the handles from being squeezed together. Once the handle is squeezed together, it triggers the high pressure canister to release the product. So this pin plays a vital part to ensuring that the fire extinguisher is compliant. You also need to have an annual maintenance schedule for your fire extinguisher, in part to ensure that the product is still effective and that in the event of a fire, when you need to use it, there'll be enough pressure. It is not a legal requirement to provide a fire extinguisher under the current legislation unless you have a HMO. Fire blankets. Fire blankets are often located in the kitchen. They should be wall mounted. They must be in their packaging and their packaging must be unbroken. If you do fit fire blankets to a property, you are required to maintain them annually, as you would do with your fire extinguishers. It is not a legal requirement to provide a fire blanket under the current legislation unless you have a HMO. Fire smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. If you've done the smoke and carbon monoxide training, you'll be familiar with some of this, but it's still important that you listen through. Smoke alarms. There are a variety of smoke alarms on the market, mainly hardwired or battery operated. Hardwired smoke alarms are connected to the mains, but they also have a battery backup inside. In case the mains electricity fails, then the battery will kick in, allowing the smoke alarm to continue its normal function. When doing your fire risk assessment, you must ensure that the smoke alarm responds to push-button tests and also a smoke test. Please remember, a smoke alarm is designed to respond to a smoke test. In the event it doesn't respond to smoke, it indicates that the alarm has failed and a new one should be fitted. The majority of smoke alarms now come with an expiry date. Hardwired smoke alarms have a 10-year lifespan and battery-operated smoke alarms have roughly 7 years, but please refer to the manufacturer's guide. You are legally required to have a smoke alarm on every habitable floor of a rental property. Heat alarms. Heat alarms are traditionally found within the kitchen environment, as a smoke alarm wouldn't be suitable as it would trigger every time you burn a piece of toast, whereas a heat alarm only triggers under excessive heat. There are both hardwired and battery-operated heat alarms. Now, to test a heat alarm, you need to do the push-button test. As there is no product available to create excessive heat except a fire, you'll be unable to test the function of this alarm apart from a push-button test. The main visual difference between a heat alarm and a smoke alarm is the small cage or dome which sits on a heat alarm. Smoke alarms tend to be flat on their casing. Carbon monoxide alarms. Carbon monoxide alarms are legally required in any room where there is a solid fuel burner, such as an open fire, wood burner or an oil burner. Carbon monoxide alarms can be hardwired or battery operated, and you will be required to complete a push-button test and a gas test to ensure that they respond to gas. If you haven't already fitted a carbon monoxide alarm in your property where there's a gas-based appliance, such as a gas boiler or gas hob, you will be required to do this. Commercial alarms. Now, some landlords have bought flats or have flats within a block of flats, where the communal areas will often contain a commercial fire alarm. Commercial fire alarms look very similar to the picture that's on your screen now. They tend to have break glass points that have a fire control panel, which is normally located near the front entrance into the building, and have either a heat detector or a smoke detector, and traditionally they look like these two on the photograph. We strongly advise you do not smoke test these alarms unless you are doing the full commercial alarm test, because if you do smoke test one of these alarms, it will trigger the entire building, including every flat within the building, and create a mass evacuation. PAT testing. PAT testing stands for Portable Appliance Testing. After testing, you'll find a small green sticker is placed on the plugs. It's commonly seen within a commercial property. The legislation is changing and it will become law for residential properties to have a full electrical safety test carried out, including annual PAT test and a certificate be issued. So when carrying out PAT testing, we would strongly advise a registered electrician carries the work out for you. During your midterm inspections, make sure you do a visual inspection of the property to ensure there are no cracked electrical sockets. Make sure that your property has an adequate RCD protector. RCD stands for Residual Current Device. It's a life-saving device which is designed to prevent you or your tenants from getting a fatal electric shock if you touch something live, such as bare wire or a cracked socket. It can also provide some protection against electrical fires. RCD offer a level of personal protection that ordinary fuses and circuit breakers cannot provide. You should be carrying out regular safety checks on all electrical appliances as part of your rental agreement. And if you own a HMO, you have a legal responsibility to complete a PAT test as part of your electrical safety inspection. PAT testing applies to all portable appliances provided in the property, such as a washing machine that's not hardwired or a dishwasher that's not hardwired. Also, it includes any electrical plug-in heaters, and if the property is furnished, this could include a kettle, fridge, microwave and TV. Electrical safety inspection. As mentioned previously, the legislation is changing and you will be required to carry out an electrical safety inspection. So all landlords are legally required to make sure all the wiring and any electrical appliances they provide in the rental home are safe. This applies to the private housing association and council tenants. Landlords should arrange for regular basic safety checks for electrics and appliances such as cookers, washing machines and fridges. Landlords can arrange for an electrical inspection by a qualified electrician before your tenant moves in. This is not currently required by law, but it will become law in 2019. Electrical appliances that have been checked by an electrician will have a PAT test sticker applied to the plug, which will show the date that it was tested and when the next inspection is due. Electrical safety in HMOs is different. If you have a HMO, the landlord is legally bound to have an electrical check every 5 years. Many shared homes and houses split into bedsits are considered HMOs, so please bear this in mind. Landlords must get the electrician's periodic inspection report showing the property continues to be safe and give a copy to the tenant and the housing officer and possibly the agent, if the agent is managing the property for you. Emergency lighting. What is emergency lighting? Emergency lighting is lighting for an emergency situation when the main power supply is cut and any normal illumination fails. The loss of mains electricity could be the result of a fire or a power cut resulting in the normal lighting supply failing. This may lead to sudden darkness and a possible danger to the occupants, either through physical danger or panic. If the property is a reasonable size with a short, non-complex exit route, then emergency lighting may not be required. For example, a one-bedroom flat that has a short hallway from which all rooms lead off. The emergency route will be going to the main front flat door, and that is where you exit. If you have a HMO, you are legally bound to have emergency lighting. Means of escape. Your responsibilities as a landlord include keeping escape routes clear and checking tenants understand that they also need to do the same. The Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, which came into force in October 2006, charges the responsible person in control of domestic premises with the safety for everyone within their property, whether they are a tenant or a visitor. The duty of care includes ensuring that routes to emergency exits from premises or property and the exits themselves are kept clear at all times, and that these emergency routes and access must lead as directly as possible to a place of safety. In other words, the entire escape route up to and including the final exit from the building or property must remain unobstructed at all times, while the distance people have to go to the escape route must be as short as possible. In the picture, it shows a red fire escape, but there's no suitable lighting outside of the property and the alley is narrow. So the tenants have to walk down the alley to be able to get to a place of safety, which will involve them walking past the burning building. This is not a suitable exit strategy. Fire loads and combustibles. In simple terms, fire loading is the measurement used by firefighters or other fire safety professionals to determine the potential severity of a fire in any given space. It describes the amount of combustible material in the building or confined space and the amount of heat that this could generate. Combustible materials can be things like plastics, furniture, furnishings and interior finishes such as flooring. As a landlord, you are required to assess these and make sure they have fire safety labels where applicable. Portable and fixed heaters. Landlords need to cater to the basic needs of their tenants, and so your rental home requires a reliable source of hot water and heating. It is the landlord's legal responsibility to provide this, and it is included in every tenancy agreement. Inadequate heating and ventilation can lead to mould growth and damp throughout the property. The difference between portable heaters and fixed heaters are portable heaters which can be electric, halogen or gas, can be moved from room to room and would plug into a socket. Fixed heating are things such as a boiler or a wall-mounted electric heater which has a fuse switch. You should mark all electric heaters with a sign saying nothing should be placed on or over this heater. There is a fire risk should the tenant decide to place their clothes over the heater to dry, or if they place objects too close to halogen heaters, which can become very hot and ignite. Dangerous substances. When we talk about dangerous substances, we consider all hazardous substances. So in a property, you would include all hazardous or toxic substances, waste or materials, and any pollutant or contaminant is classed as a dangerous substance. Dangerous substances can include petrol from a lawnmower or paint tins stored in a property near a combustible material. Asbestos potentially in a garage roof and cleaning products or external treatment products which when mixed can create toxic gases. It is important that if you have any dangerous substances that you are either able to remove them from the property or you can clearly label the products so the tenant knows that they shouldn't be mixed with other products. So for instance, if you're storing petrol from a lawnmower, it must be stored in a fully regulated petrol can, complete with a lid, and it must not be damaged. It must be stored in a cool, dry place. Please don't keep petrol cans in sheds, as during the summer a shed can heat up to excessive temperatures and the petrol inside creates a gas, which can then cause explosions. Fire safety signs and notices. In most residential premises of average size and normal risk, fire safety signs and notices will not be required. However, larger, with more than 3 stories, and complicated premises, or HMOs, are likely to require signage. To decide if signs are required, you need to consider the following questions. Are occupiers familiar with escape routes? Is one escape route shorter than the other? Or are there changes in direction on your escape route? Or are there any areas where confusion may occur when exiting the building? Are there external secondary escape routes which should be preferable, which could mean using a window rather than a door? Is there any firefighting equipment that requires signage? Fire exit signs with directional arrows should provide clear and unambiguous information about the fire escape route and the fire exit. Measures to limit fire spread and development. Compartmentalisation serves to stop or slow the spread of fire and to allow safer evacuation of a property or building. Fire escape routes are usually compartmentalised, and there can be compartmentalisation between different stories of a building, between cellars and living accommodation, and between risk areas and living accommodation, such as an internal garage which leads into the internal property. Compartmentalisation can be achieved by specifying minimum standards of plasterboard thickness for walls and ceilings, and by specifying fire-resistant doors, for example fire doors. There are 2 main levels to compartmentalisation. There are 30 and 60 minutes worth of protection. The standard in most residential properties is 30 minutes. The picture shows a hole between the floor and the ceiling. If this is left for a period of time and a fire occurs, it will allow smoke and fire to travel quickly through the property, floor to floor, as the fire exploits a weakness between the ceiling and the floor above. Often these holes occur when a water leak has happened within the property. Also bear in mind leaks will often lead to light fittings, and light fittings are electric. As you know, water and electricity should never be combined, and they can cause a fire risk. If the property has a hole in the ceiling and a fire occurs as a direct result of water and electrical products mixing, the risk to the tenant is much higher. Congratulations on completing the education element for fire risk assessments. This is quite a long, large education element, so please review any parts you feel you need to review before taking your final test. If you're ready for the final stage of this module, which is to sit a short exam of 15 questions, please press the next button.